Welcome to today's explainer. Look, if you live in New York City or you're even just thinking about moving here, you know that getting around is way more than just a logistical choice. It's a lifestyle. And honestly, sometimes it feels like a battle. Today, we're unpacking the rapidly shifting realities and hidden costs of commuting. We're going to look at the concrete data, the economic research, and the latest transit policies in 2026 to see exactly how the scales are tipping in the great debate of cars versus public transit. Let's dive right in. Let's start right at the street level, where the visceral pain of alternate side parking and shrinking street space has created a total commuter's nightmare. One local resident perfectly captured the sheer frustration of urban car ownership, noting that after the pandemic, finding a spot went from a 30-minute chore to a 90-plus minute expedition. I mean, they literally said otherwise you're out there with the absolute worst of humanity. With permanent outdoor dining structures, new bike lanes, and dedicated bus lanes eating up curb space, the physical real estate for your car is just disappearing. It's basically a free-for-all out there. And it's not just the wasted time, right? Owners face staggering physical damage to their vehicles just by leaving them parked on the street. The variety of hazards is honestly kind of wild. We aren't just talking about a little city dust here. Residents constantly report bumpers being physically shoved by other drivers trying to parallel park, paint buckled by yellow taxi doors, and brutal scrapes across the hood from garbage trucks. In one documented case, a resident actually faced a $16,000 hit-and-run repair bill while their car was simply parked. The resale value of a street-parked car in New York plummets faster than almost anywhere else in the country. Which naturally brings us to the ultimate question we're going to objectively answer today. Does holding onto a car still make sense? Is the convenience of hopping into your own driver's seat really worth the massive financial and emotional toll? Here's exactly how we're going to break this down. We'll cover the NYC parking nightmare, the congestion pricing effect, the politics of car ownership, the 2026 transit alternative, and finally, the ultimate commuter verdict. All right, part one, the NYC parking nightmare. Let's move beyond the emotional frustration for a second and look at the academic core of how New Yorkers actually make their commuting choices. In her Transportation Research Journal analysis, researcher Deborah Salon unlocked a crucial truth about the psychology of the city's commuters. She looked deeply into discrete choice modeling, which is essentially the science of how we make trade-offs. And what she found fundamentally changes how we should view urban transportation policies. Solon's finding reveals a simple but powerful truth. For New Yorkers, saving time is the ultimate currency. It far outweighs the actual monetary cost of a trip. This is called commuter time sensitivity. Basically, people will gladly tolerate higher expenses if it means they can shave precious minutes off their commute. If you make driving slower, people abandon their cars. If you make transit faster, people flock to it. Time is the absolute #1 driver of behavior in this city. That takes us to part two, the congestion pricing effect. Knowing that time dictates behavior, policymakers introduced sweeping changes to manipulate how fast we move. As of January 2025, passenger vehicles get hit with a $9 peak hour toll just to enter Manhattan's central business district. This cordon-based program covers everything below 60th Street. Motorcycles pay $4.50, and trucks, they pay upwards of $21. This is a massive financial disincentive specifically designed to alter the math of that time versus money equation we just talked about. But you've got to look at what that toll actually bought. Data from the NBR shows a 15% increase in traffic speeds, which translates to over 10 hours saved per year for a hypothetical commuter. Average speeds jumped from an agonizingly slow 8.2 miles per hour to 9.7 miles per hour. And during weekend evenings, speeds increased by more than 25%. So for those who do choose to pay the toll and drive, the journey is objectively, measurably faster. This data perfectly demonstrates what researchers call the Queensboro effect. Because roads like the Queensboro Bridge operate on a steep congestion function, meaning they are packed right to their absolute breaking point, removing just a tiny fraction of cars drastically improves the flow for everyone else. Think about this. Speeds on the Queensboro improved by 5 miles per hour simply by deterring a small percentage of drivers. Moving right along to part three, the politics of car ownership. While congestion pricing saves time, the financial squeeze on car owners is highly dependent on who governs the city. Reitel's analysis contrasts two very different political philosophies that dictate the immediate future of street parking and garage access. On one side, you have the Adams direction, which treats cars as tolerated but burdened. Congestion pricing exists below 60th Street, ticketing is moderate, and storage is expensive but generally stable. On the other side, you have a Mamdani-style direction, where cars are actively discouraged. This philosophy prioritizes dense, transit-focused living by expanding congestion zones, shrinking garage capacity through zoning, and using highly aggressive ticketing. Whether ownership is treated as a pragmatic choice or a luxury, both directions guarantee that maintaining a vehicle will become more expensive. Even under the more moderate Adams approach, insurance premiums seem modest hikes. But under the Mamdani approach, reduced garage capacity means rising storage costs, and aggressive enforcement leads to significant insurance hikes. The trend line points in exactly one direction, and that's up. So, if you decide to keep your vehicle, you really have to ask yourself if you can absorb these compounding annual costs. Analysts suggest planning for a 10 to 20% increase in the cost of vehicle ownership year over year. The crucial takeaway here is figuring out if your specific lifestyle truly requires a car or if you're just paying a massive premium out of sheer habit.
Let's pivot to Part 4, the 2026 Transit Alternative.
If the burden of a car is getting too high, we've got to evaluate the primary solution available to most residents today. The 2026 Omni system automatically caps your weekly local transit spend at exactly $35. You don't even have to pre-purchase an unlimited pass anymore. The moment you use your contactless card or smartphone to pay for your 12th ride in a single week, the system just stops charging you. Every local bus and subway ride after that is completely 100% free. With the physical MetroCard fully retired, contactless payments make moving across the 5 boroughs incredibly predictable and seamless. The base fare for a local subway or bus is a flat $3. If you need a more comfortable, longer commute from the outer boroughs, express buses are $7.25, and they actually have their own weekly cap of $67. Commuter rails like the LIRR and Metro North offer city ticket for travel within city limits, peaking at $7.25 as well. And we can't forget the 2-hour window. This perfectly illustrates how the MTA encourages multimodal trips, vastly expanding your reach without increasing your daily budget. By using the exact same payment device, the Omni system gives you one free transfer between subways and buses or between different bus routes within a 2-hour window. This is how the city is actively trying to win that time versus cost battle we discussed earlier, making transit more flexible and financially predictable than ever before. And finally, Part 5, the ultimate commuter verdict. So when we stack the parking nightmares and rising policies against the modern transit network, who actually wins? Well, when we break it down to the absolute essentials, you probably still need a car if you live deep in the outer boroughs, like Staten Island or Eastern Queens, where those pesky transit gaps exist. You need it if your job requires heavy equipment transport, or if you regularly escape the city for weekend getaways, like skiing or kayaking, where renting a car for 3 days becomes a massive headache. However, you absolutely do not need a car, and are honestly likely way better off without one if you live within walking distance of the subway, if you want to avoid monthly garage fees that can easily soar over $700, or if your lifestyle is primarily localized to your neighborhood. As the landscape continues to shift, you have to decide what your ultimate priority is on the streets of New York. The data shows us that car ownership in the city is actively transitioning from a common convenience to a heavily regulated luxury. Meanwhile, the transit network is modernizing its payment structures to reward frequent riders. So the final question I want to leave you with today is this. In a city where absolutely every minute and every dollar counts, will you pay a premium for the private space of a car, or will you let the city's transit web do the driving for you? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the data, and I'll catch you next time.